We're upgrading our patrons Ognis the Dragon's Lash deck into an absolute powerhouse.
I'm Mia, and I like destroying my opponent's stuff.
I'm BZ. I enjoy a good combat step. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. This is the website to end all websites. If you're trying to buy Magic the Gathering cards, if you're trying to sell Magic the Gathering cards, I'm sending you to Card Kingdom every single time because they're amazing.
They have amazing prices. You get free shipping, $50 or more, and they are being so kind and helping us build a landing page where we can show our favorite cards right to you.
It's going to be a great year with Card Kingdom, and also sponsored by Dragon Shield. They got the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you want to sleeve your deck, I'm thinking you use Dragon Shield or you're making a mistake.
You can use the code
NERDS
to save 5% at dragonshield.com.
That's 5% of your dollars, your Benjamins, your
real
Benjamin
money
Franklins.
tax dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Get to saving as we go to our Commander Tune-Up. What is a Commander Tune-Up, you might ask? Mia?
A Commander tune-up is when we get a pre-existing deck list from a patron and we turn it into something that's more consistent or something a little bit more expensive or something that just whatever their guidelines that they give us, we are going to tune it to whatever they say. But this is our last Commander tune-up ever because we just revamped our Patreon. So instead of doing a dedicated video like this, we're actually going to do 30-minute one-on-one calls to answer any question you have about your deck or multiple decks or just cards in general.
Yeah, we've got a huge revamp to our Patreon. Please go check it out because it's awesome stuff that we want to give back to you for a way for you to support the channel and just for a way to everybody to be happy. Everything's getting upgraded. It's 2024. I'll say it again. It's the year of the nerds. So head over to the Patreon, see if there's anything that tickles your fancy. If so, we'd love to have you. But we got Captain Regals. They have an Ognis Dragon's Lash deck. This is actually a happy birthday, a belated birthday gift to their friend Allison. So we're upgrading this whole deck. We got an aggressive dragon theme for the deck, which I haven't really seen for Ognis. But probably first, we should read Ognis. She's one Rakdos hybrid, red, Gruul hybrid for a 3/3 haste. She's a Viashino warrior, and whenever a creature with haste to control attacks, you get a tapped treasure token.
Our patron really wanted to make it Jund Dragons and just have it a Dragon Kindred type theme and just make them very aggressive and make them swing in for the win and get a lot of treasure tokens out of it. Unfortunately, when this deck started though, it only had 13 dragons.
Yeah, Captain Regals mentioned this deck sort of got confused along the way. There was a lot of choices and changes made overall, and then there was some other smaller themes that we noticed that were added in. So we're going to try to streamline the deck, really get that aggressive dragons vibe, and we're going to go change by change and tell you what we cut. The first thing that I noticed in this deck was sort of like a reanimation sub-theme, and I don't know if Ognis is really supported. Ognis doesn't really inherently support that at all, so you got to go out of your way to find some cards. The first cut is Virtue of Persistence. Just expensive. I don't think this card is bad because it has that adventure mode, so it's definitely a usable Magic card in Commander, unlike something like Debtor's Knell. But I just don't think in this deck where you're trying to be so aggressive and push through damage and constantly pressure your opponents, this isn't going to do anything for you.
You want your creatures to have haste and to swing in for those tapped treasure tokens, so you're trying to go super fast. So we're replacing this with Delighted Halfling. It says that your legendary creatures can't be countered, which is amazing to bring out Ognis, and it's done some real work in BZ's decks.
Yeah, one of the ways to speed up decks is by including these 1-mana dorks and just ramp in general. This deck didn't have a ton of ramp, so we want to get those dragons out sooner and attack with them immediately. I think Virtue of Persistence getting cut for Delighted Halfling, already that's a huge mana value change, and that's going to make the deck a little faster. We also cut Vat of Rebirth. It works with this treasure thing. So the deck is aggressive dragons, but because Ognis makes so many treasures, there can be some treasure synergies in the deck. So that's sort of the sub-theme we allowed for. But this one, again, is it's like reanimating plus treasures, so we didn't need it, and we went for Ignoble Hierarch, the same logic as Delighted Halfling. I didn't want to add every 1-mana dork to this deck, but you could probably even add Birds of Paradise too, Captain, if you're watching, but these are the two we added.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to get those expensive dragons out, especially since your treasure tokens are coming in tapped. Another one that we changed is changing Animate Dead to Nature's Lore, just keeping in mind the fact that it's more important to get those lands down, to power out those dragons, to get the tapped treasure tokens to, because you can't use them immediately to just bring out more and more dragons to help your game plan go along.
Yeah, this deck didn't have any ways to fill the graveyard, so Animate Dead is a fine card, it's just this deck can't support it, and this deck already had 3 visits, so I figured we should either cut 3 visits or add Nature's Lore, and I opted on the side of add Nature's Lore because a turn 3 Ognis is like so crucial. Getting a turn 3 Ognis, which then gives you like a turn 4 big dragon, which probably has haste because of the deck, it's just a very powerful curve, and that'll help you dominate the early game.
It really just helps you speed ahead above all of your opponents, because usually dragon decks hurt in the early game when you're trying to set up, because you have such big bodies that you need to pour all that mana into. So getting down Ognis and then just getting those treasure tokens as fast as possible is really crucial to this game plan. Another one is Reanimate that was in this deck. We had talked about earlier, but it's not really the synergy of filling up your graveyard to bring things out. So I feel like Reanimate is one of those things where if you coincidentally have something good in the graveyard or someone else does, then you can use it. But instead we put in Toski, Bearer of Secrets. You're going to be hitting in for a lot of damage to begin with because everything has haste and because dragons naturally have evasion. So you're going to want to get cards with it too, so you never just sputter out.
Yeah, Toski also has a tendency to survive board wipes. So if somebody clears the board out and you untap with Toski, you're also going to play a bunch of haste creatures, or one or two at least, to follow it up with. So you're going to get a lot of cards right away. And that's also true if you wipe the board. I mean, Toski's still going to hit, and then you'll get a card back. It's not the worst thing in the world. Just that Reanimate, it's never inefficient, but the point at which it becomes good in this deck is too late, because we want to be aggressive and pressure and close the door before people can set up and spend all their mana.
Reanimate's a cheap way to bring something cool back, but at that point it's just chance, so I would really rather put something else in. Another type of Reanimate that was in this deck is Felden of the Third Path. It just cares about things in your graveyard which we're not filling up to begin with, and we're not really expecting our creatures to die too much in like big board wipes, or at least swinging in combat damage, because they're much beefier than everyone else's, because we're ramping them out faster. So instead we put in Cursed Mirror. I really like this card. I think it's fun as either a mana rock or just copying something, and it's like never really dead.
Yeah, it's kind of good in most points in the game. It can help you really slam the door, and if you're trying to develop, fine, a 3-mana mana rock, it's not the end of the world. I noticed that Felden was like a Reanimator card, but it also played into the haste a little bit, but we kept that with this exchange. Cursed Mirror still gives the creature haste, so it still gives you a treasure when it attacks if Ognis is in play, and I think that's perfect. You can clone one of your dragons to just double up on the pain, or clone the best thing that opponent has, maybe a Grave Titan even. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's Magical Christmas Land, but you can get 2 zombies and then 2 more.
2 zombies and 2 more? I'm sure there's nothing else that could ever do that.
What other Magic card could produce zombie tokens?
Absolutely nothing. But the next one I think is one of BZ's favorites. We're changing Tragic Slip to Soul Shatter. The value on this is amazing, but I was like, you could talk about it. I know how much you love it.
I love Soul Shatter so much. I will recommend it to anybody looking for a solid black removal spell. It is a 3-for-1. It is not expensive. It takes out pretty much always everyone's most relevant threat, because it cares about mana value. So very rarely are you going to miss on this. And it helps you pressure kind of everybody at the same time. Tragic Slip, I can't guarantee Morbid in this deck, but with Soul Shatter, you take their biggest thing out of the way, and now it makes it so that you can pressure even multiple players now, because you're just kind of invalidating whatever they just did. Oh, you tapped out for a 5/5 that doesn't affect the board? Well, not only am I going to kill it, but I'm going to accidentally kill it by killing these other 2 things that I really wanted to hit, and now I'm going to hit you all with my creatures anyway.
If you've watched any of our live streams where we audit decks, you know BZ loves Soul Shatter.
It's one of my most added cards, just because every time I go, all right, it's a black deck, we want removal, we want to make sure that we're staying ahead and getting good card advantage. Oh, I love Soul Shatter.
I mean, it's a 3-for-1. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why would you only play single target removal?
I don't know why.
Another one that we change is Urza's Incubator. This is normally very good in Kindred decks, but we actually change it for Scaled Nurturer. It plays more into the dragon theme, and the fact is you get a little bit of upside when you're casting dragons, which we added a bunch into.
It's interesting that we are going to have to, in this next section, cut dragon payoffs for more dragons. I don't think we hit critical mass for Urza's Incubator or these next cards that care about dragons specifically. And I don't think we're there even after adding. We upped the dragon count a little bit, we'll get to. I think we upped it from 13 to 18. I still don't think we're there. I think Urza's Incubator is for, 25-ish of the creature type. And I think you also get a lot of value and mileage out of it when your commander is the creature that you want. But Ognis is not a dragon, even though it looks like it. It's a Viashino, so we can't reduce that. And all that stuff adds up to making me just go, I think this is just not worth it most of the time.
Is it bad that I thought that Ognis was Jar Jar Binks at one point?
I don't even know how that's possible.
I looked real fast and my brain never corrected it.
I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, so Scaled Nurture is a dragon, and it functions as a similar purpose. It ramps. So you can get a dragon out, have some of the other payoffs that stayed in the deck because they were better, and just forget the high variance part of it where you don't draw dragons and this card's bad.
Another dragon payoff that we did change was Vanquisher's Banner into Corvold, Fake-Cursed King. Vanquisher's Banner is good if you have a higher count of dragons, but with 18 max and 13 when we started, that is not enough to trigger this, especially when it comes down for 5 mana.
And but the cards that you want to cast with Vanquisher's Banner, they have to be cheap. I don't want to be able to only cast 1 per turn. With Vanquisher's Banner, I want to name like human and cast like 2 humans every time I untap with this.
I love it in my vampires deck where it's like 2 drop, 1 drop, and then you're okay to go. But dragons are so chunky that's going to be tough. Captain Regal's actually talked about Jund dragons, and I feel like Corvold Faker's King is the staple Jund dragon that everyone thinks about. You know, the big, powerful king.
I was surprised it wasn't in here just because it also works extremely well with treasure tokens, which we are just pooping out left and right. So every time we cast something off of these treasures, we draw a bajillion cards. Corvold gets bigger, so we can pressure our opponents, and it's not hard for when he enters or attacks to just sack one of the treasures that we make. We can even stack the triggers so that we attack with Corvold and a haste creature, get a treasure first, then sack it with Corvold to draw.
That's really, really good. And I really do like the fact that it is playing into multiple themes in here. Crucible Fire is another one we took out as a dragon payoff, and we put in Cloth Unrivaled Ancient instead. Crucible Fire is one of those win more cards. We talked about it a little bit in our previous video. But long story short, if you have a lot of dragons already, you're probably going to be dealing a lot of damage to the face. And so it's good when you're winning, but it's awful if you're losing. But with Cloth, if you put him down and you attack, you're going to be making a lot of mana, which helps you rebuild your board or just help establish yourself and just faster than every other opponent.
Cloth makes an obscene amount of mana, and I haven't seen too many board states where Cloth hits and you don't dominate, especially when all the creatures in this deck have haste. He will frequently come down alongside some other dragon, then you're attacking for like 8, which means he's negative mana because he's only 7 and he's going to always attack for 4, so you're only going to ever pay like 3 for this guy. It's just, Cloth goes hard, and it's a very aggressive card, even though it is a little expensive. We also got Nogi, Draco Zealot. I don't like these cards that are not dragons and only reduce dragons by 1. Even in like dedicated dragon decks, I don't really play these. It can turn into a dragon, but with no haste and stuff, I'm just going to switch it for a Goblin and Narcomancer. That basically reduces every single card in your deck. This card is really good, and it leads to some nutty starts. This is a card that lets you play a lot of spells in a turn, and it's going to help you get those aggressive, I'm dominating by turn 5 type board states.
It comes down so early too, and the fact is you're going to be playing a lot of colored spells because of the fact that dragons need a ton of pips. Another one that we cut is Yuvara Hellkite for Rhythm of the Wild. Yuvara is another one of those win more cards. If you have dragons, you're going to make more dragons, but if you don't, it's not what I want to be spending like 8 or 9 mana on. Rhythm of the Wild though is really going to help because it's going to give everything haste, and that's really awesome considering it is playing into Ognis' theme, plus dragons with haste, like what could be better?
Yeah, and I had to look this up because I was trying to figure out what is the best haste enabler to add. Do I want to add Rhythm of the Wild, Fires of Avimaya, or like Rising of the Day or something? And I had to look it up. Rhythm of the Wild says when your creatures enter, they gain either a counter or haste. When you give a creature haste with Rhythm of the Wild, it doesn't go away. So that's relevant if I play a 4/4 that does not have haste. Rhythm gives it haste. I attack, get a treasure from Ognis, but next turn it'll still have haste. So I'll still get a treasure, which just makes this like better than Fires of Avimaya or Rising of the Day. Super weird.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, so obviously if they already have haste, then you put a counter on them and you attack for more.
Yeah, I really like that. I didn't know it worked like that, so that's super cool. It's definitely, I was thinking Dragon Tempest as the haste enabler in this deck.
That one's in here too. It's just a great, like, of course those are some of the best cards in the deck.
But yeah, that's super cool. Another one is Tribute to Hirobi. We replaced it with Loyal Apprentice. Tribute to Hirobi is, Rat Jam here and there.
It is a card we call Rat Jam. It makes a haster when it flips, I think was the logic here. But we just went with Loyal Apprentice because not only does he have haste, but he makes creatures with haste every turn and just stack them up.
Plus they fly too, so it
They're
really
not
helps.
dying.
It helps chip in damage here or there. Or if you just want to swing in with your big boys, you'll still have little like chump blockers up if they have big flyers coming back at you.
I mean, if you go, let's say, Delighted Halfling into Loyal Apprentice into Ognis, you make 3 treasures when you get your first Ognis swing.
This is where we put a Moxie on it, if we had one, but instead we're actually going to plug our Patreon because we have a bunch of new things on our Patreon. We have a Patreon-only podcast. We have early access plans to like the big projects we're doing and travel plans that we're going. So like it's super cool, and there is a super high tier where if you get it, you can actually come to us and spend an entire day playing Commander with us in person.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites though, it's kind of the stuff that we can't really do on the main channel that we want to offer as as like a bonus Patreon for people who are willing to like support us and help us do this full time is spell table gameplay with like other creators and our friends and stuff. We're gonna like record spell table games, and the only way you're ever gonna be able to access those is through Patreon. So we wanted to make something like super special. There's a bunch of stuff that is like extra nitpicking nerds that you literally cannot see any other place for any other reason.
I'm really excited to make all this content, and I'm really excited to share it with you too. So go check it out. We'd really appreciate it if you did.
Every little bit helps us, and we love you also. And we're going to move on to the deck. Tarian's Soul Cleaver is a card that works with these treasures. It wants you to sacrifice the treasures, and the equipped creature gets huge. But I think it's a little bit off. It kind of is aggressive, but I think this equipment that requires this setup cost and can only pump one creature, and the creature you pump is very known, it's not a surprise. So it could still be chump block. A lot of our creatures don't have tramples. I just didn't think it was that good. I think it was taking up space, and I wanted to add another dragon. So Realm Scorcher Dragon, you're going to bargain away a treasure, still that synergy, and then you're going to maybe shoot out some utility creatures, and it's got haste.
I really love the idea of putting bargain in this deck. That's super fun, and the fact that since you're just farting out treasures, a Beezy term,
yeah,
that is just really easy to just spend one more mana to get that really awesome effect. And just if you happen to have anything else around too, like if you just have like a little token that someone gave you from like a generous gift or something, you can also just sacrifice that instead of one more mana to get that effect too.
Yeah, we got Carter Doomscourge, kind of an aggressive card. It forces your opponents to send their stuff elsewhere, which is positive for you. And then if your stuff dies when it attacks or theirs, you get to drain them a little bit. I felt like we were close. We were really close on Carter. This is probably the last card that I technically cut from the deck, but I wanted more dragons, and I think Glorybringer is just not. It's not a better card even, but I think it ties the deck together because A, it has haste, B, it flies, C, it's a dragon. I think that's going to contribute to more aggressive stuff. You can just exert it when it attacks and deal forward to a non-dragon.
I think the exertion is very nice, and also Captain Regals really wanted a dragon-themed deck for this, so it's really important that we stick to that flavor.
Yeah, so I think, that's a good way to put it. With this cut, we do actually give up a little bit of power. I don't think that's true for the rest of these cuts, but with this one, you give up a little bit, but you work more towards what they wanted the deck to be, which is aggressive dragons. Carter's aggressive. He just doesn't have anything to do with dragons or treasures.
Yeah, so I think that playing into this is a really nice tie-in, and also just brings the deck together a little more in both flavor and synergy.
Yeah, next up is Mindblade Render. This is a card that actually cares about warriors dealing combat damage, but it's a warrior, and Ognis is a warrior. But since this doesn't have haste, and there's really only, I think, 5 warriors in the deck before we started cutting, I just want to add Cavern Horde Dragon. That's the one that gets reduced by the number of artifacts somebody has. It's like a hasting thing, and then when it hits, you get a treasure for each artifact they control. So if they have a lot, card's off the chain bonkers. If they have a little, it's a little overpriced, but I think you can reasonably assume someone's got like 4 artifacts by turn, 6.
Especially if you are playing against artifact-heavy decks. I mean, the Shorikai decks, right, or vehicles. Those are just running around nowadays, or just someone who's just making a bunch of treasures with like Smothering Tithe. I think it's pretty easy to assume that people have 4 more artifacts, and then you're just going to be sitting on so many treasures, you could cast like 5 big dragons out of your hand. Yeah,
this thing's big, it makes treasures, it's got haste, it's a dragon. And Mindblade Render, I don't feel comfortable enough sneaking through Ognis or this, since Ognis doesn't have flying, then I think it's better off to just cut it. I think Toski was a better ad.
I think so too. We need the card advantage. We're going to move on to the mana base now, where we just have a few upgrades. Blackcleave Cliffs, Copperline Gorge, and Blooming Marsh are all the fast lands, and we'd really rather replace them with pain lands like Sulphurous Springs, Karplusan Forest, and Llanowar Wastes. That way, no matter where you are in the game, you can use that mana because it comes in untapped. Even though it does ding you a little bit in the life, we start with 40, and we're going to use it.
Yeah, I know we want to be aggressive, but I think these types of fast lands are not cards I play in Commander really ever. You're going to get to turns 5, 6, 7 and need plays. Unlike where these actually see play in like competitive decks, 1v1 formats, where you can hit 3 lands and then you're good for most of the game in like Modern or Pioneer or some other older formats even. But yeah, I don't think they're really that good in Commander, even if you're trying to be aggressive. And look at what we replaced them with. We replaced them with lands that always come in untapped, no matter what, always make the colors. But I'm more willing to trade life total for aggression and developing my spells early versus tapped lands that don't work.
WotC gave me 40 life, and I'm going to use 39 of it.
I will if I need to. A couple other lands. We cut Castle Lochthwain for Blightstep Pathway. This is just another untapped like pseudo duel that I wanted to add. You could have added Blood Crypt instead, but I didn't want to push it too much on the land. So, Captain, if you're watching, Blood Crypt is the ideal choice, but Blightstep Pathway is also fair. Castle Lochthwain, there's actually not that many swamps in this deck, so Castle Lochthwain isn't even guaranteed to be untapped. And once that's true, I'm kind of off of it. it is late game card draw, but you just need to make sure you have all the swamps. So you have to alter the mana base a little bit to get this in.
I think we could staple that onto creatures and other effects too, like the Toski that we have. Riveteer's Outlook is also being replaced with Overgrown Tomb. The fact that Overgrown Tomb can come in and untapped if you pay 2 life is really nice. And Riveteer's Outlook just has something come in tapped and it sacrifices immediately. You don't get like the mystery of it, which you might want if you had a normal fetch or even Terramorphic Expanse.
Really what I care about, is the entering tapped. It's just going to hold you back. Same with Savage Lands. It's not unplayable, but I think if we're trying to push it and go foot to the gas, I want Stomping Ground, and especially since I think if we're talking shock lands, you don't have to have all 3. They're obviously great lands, but I wanted to prioritize these 2 specifically because Overgrown Tomb and Stomping Ground are forests that really power up your 3 visits and your Nature's Lore. So I wanted to at least get those 2. Blood Crypt is optional, I guess.
I think so too. It'll help with the Castle Lockswain if you kept it in, but I don't think you will.
Same with like Urborg. So we spent 113 total to upgrade this deck. It was 21 changes. The original average mana value of the deck was 3.42. The new average mana value is 3.39. That's with a small asterisk because we didn't bother altering the mana value of like Cavern Horde Dragon. It doesn't actually cost 9 mana. It probably costs like 5 or 6. So take that with a grain of salt, but we definitely lowered it. So I think overall, pretty sweet changes.
Those are some really nice changes. But if you actually want to change some cards in your deck and want to change some of the cards we mentioned in here of the changes we made, look at this video right here. It's actually about cards that are Win More specifically.